So I've changed my plans a little bit on the exhaust side of the turbo. I was going to use the 2G DSM O2 housing, and I was thinking about either just dumping the exhaust straight out the side, straight out the bottom, and maybe like circle back once the car is on the road and drivable, because undoubtedly that would be a little bit louder than I want for a daily driver. However, the kind of like looking through how I could possibly fit the pipes, it seemed that the problem with going straight out the fender is my oxygen sensor is really close to the exhaust exit, which means that air might be able to get in there and also affect the reading of the oxygen sensor. At least it would be, running maybe richer than desired, which is better than running lean, but still not ideal situation for my exhaust. I don't really want to worry about that, and dumping it straight down will just potentially resonate right back up into the cabin, so that'll mean I'll have to go full exhaust sooner than I want to. Other option, the tire is right there, so I can't really dump it to the tire because it gets really hot right there. So what I've done is I've picked up these exhaust flanges. The wastegate, I think I'll just dump right back into this main pipe. And then this will be a curve going kind of back where the turbo comes out of. So I'll show you what I'm thinking here. So here is the back of the turbo, and so it'll be dumping straight back here, and my plan will be having this come straight out and then go back through here. And you can see that's the exhaust manifold right there, so there's a little bit of space. I can squeeze it down there. And so in the short term, my plan is to make two pipes, one coming out of here, the small one merging into the main dump, and then have it basically pointed back with a V-band on the back and have it ready for a full exhaust. Now I likely won't finish making the full exhaust right now just because there's other things to work on, and I can easily do that later on. So I'll do that for each side. I have cut this out and I've welded this up right here just to prevent it from rusting or anything, and making a little bit more clearance. So that means there's more fab work than anticipated. I had a fairly simple plan of just dumping the exhaust straight out, but I'll be much happier with this setup, and these flanges weren't very expensive, so that was nice. What it really means is I won't have to make this pipe twice. So I could have just fabricated something on the end of here, have it dump, basically very easily out the fender or the bumper, or right straight out to the ground. But that means that eventually I'll have to, remake that, because that's not going to be my long-term solution. Again, this is for a daily driver. And these, I can't really use this. I would have liked to, but this is 2.5 inch that I'm using, so I'm probably going to do 2.5 inch all the way back. But there's no way to really make this curve back towards the car, because it points like directly out when this is on there. So there's no tight enough 2.5 inch bend that would make that happen, and that's more fabrication. And when I can just start with this flange, and then you can see how essentially this just fit right on there, and it'll work fairly well. So once again, more fabrication than originally anticipated, but anybody with a project car knows that that's pretty much always the case. It's just more, I get to use my welder. There's nothing really super complicated about this. It's just I have to do it, and it takes time to do it. So, there's that aspect of it. And as we're getting closer to the end of this build, I'm kind of, thinking through, like, it's been a lot of work and there's a lot of things to do. And at the very end, we'll be driving this thing, we'll be making boost. But, these small little things that you have to do are kind of the fun things. You know, the things that when they're done, you could be happy that you actually did this and it worked out well. I mean, sure, we're gonna have a sweet turbocharged Subaru at the end, but really the experience of building this thing is kind of the biggest reward. So that's what I'm keeping in my mind when I'm gonna fabricate these new exhaust downpipes. So after I decided that I was going to make my own downpipe, I kind of started this morning with something that looks a little bit like this. We've got just the flange here, and this is a 2.5 inch. And this is I don't know, 1 3/4, something like that. Instead of rocking the factory 2G DSM downpipe, I'm just going to be making my own. Or O2 housing is actually what they call this guy. Get the spot for the O2 sensor. And so since then, I've been busy fabricating this, and so this will go in exactly that same place, but instead of, let's see, going out away from the car, this one will turn back in and go exactly where I want it to. And actually turned out pretty good. I've been giving my welds a lot more heat, and it even looked like I could have used a little bit more heat here. and would have been fine, but none of the welds were particularly difficult, besides inside there, which I just used the good technique of using a lot of weld. But fairly satisfied with how it turned out. Yeah, I think it's going to be strong. I'm going to have to coat it with something, but I can show you where it goes. We'll just put this one on, and then we'll be dumping the exhaust right down underneath the car as I covered, and that'll be how we do it. The other side I've yet to fabricate, but it will be very similar to what you see there. Got the driver's side exhaust mostly done. I've begun working on the passenger side, and I'll show you kind of some of the logic that I'm going through when I'm setting it up and sizing up everything and marking everything and cutting everything. So if you haven't made this type of thing before, there's a very specific thought process, and I actually am new to this myself. So I've watched a lot of this been done on, say, like Mighty Car Mods, stuff like that. And so there's kind of a order of operations that has to happen. And so I actually have a merge here that I have to weld. Merge is just like I've attached a small straight bit to this curve, because this was a 180 that I've cut exactly in half, so I've got two 90s, and that gives me the most flexibility. So I started with that, kind of put it in place to see what I needed. I needed about 2 inches right here, so I went ahead and did that, because if you go ahead and weld the entire thing and then you have to try to take it apart, that's going to be a huge pain in the ass. You'll probably have to start over. And so the other thing you want to think about is anytime you cut a pipe like this, you'll end up with like a bunch of, let's see here, a bunch of this like nasty shit in there. And it's less critical past the turbo, but say you were making your intercooler pipes, this could be deadly to your turbo, because you get some air pressure in there, you get that metal going through your turbo, that's goodbye turbo. So keep that in mind. Before you weld the pipes together, make sure you get all that crap out of there. And anything you want to do to the inside of the pipe, for example, some of mine were kind of rusty and I had to take basically a wire wheel to the inside of them, do all of that before you even start welding them together. So order of operations, do your cuts, make sure every cut is completely clean of any slag or any small metal shards that could essentially get stuck in there. That way you don't end up with a bunch of it like way deep in there where you can't reach, or it's going to be a big pain in the ass. Okay, so my order of operations then, I'm going to finish this weld off because it's just something simple that I can do right now. Then I will finish fitting this here, and I'll kind of like get it lined up. I will mark all of this. I will take this pipe off. I will then cut out the hole that needs to get cut out of here. Then once that's done, I'll put this back in place. I will tack it, beep beep, wherever on that side. Then I will cut these tacks off the flange. I will pull this pipe completely out. Then I will finish welding this, having already tacked it so it stays exactly where I want it. Then I'll come back and I'll put both of them back into the flange, and I'll tack that on in place, make sure it fits, look at all the clearances, and then from there, once I'm confident, I will weld the inside of both of these flanges. If I'm happy with that, I might even weld the outside of these flanges, just for a little more strength. So that's basically the thought process that I'm going through when doing this. This is the first time I've done this. The other pipe that I've done was the very first one. And really how I learned how to do this was just watching other people doing it enough times. And like I said, Mighty Car Mods, watching Turbo Yoda do all of his TIG welding, he has to do the same exact thing, because the order of operations, when you can get the torch in and when you can't, is essentially the same thing as what I'm doing here with my MIG welder. So hopefully that helps you guys out. I'm looking forward to finishing these exhaust pipes off and eventually firing the car up.
In the the future I'll be priming and painting these things with products rated for high temperatures, and I'm even planning to make my own custom full exhaust. That's all for this edition of Easy on Cars. If you stay tuned, I'm replacing my fuel pump, I made some oil cooler lines, and I'm about to fire this thing up. Take it easy, easy on cars.